It was more than 2 hours of allegations. Former Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn has publicly accused Japanese officials of falsifying charges against him and trying to force a confession from him.
This was not about justice. This was, I felt I was the hostage of a country that I have served for 17 years. I dedicated my professional life. I was proud of it. I revived a company that nobody else before me was able to do.
He says the case against him is politically motivated and has been engineered to cut Nissan's ties with French automaker Renault. But his former Japanese colleagues say he's throwing the company under the bus to shield his financial misconduct.
We discovered his huge fraud 2 years ago. He was my trusted boss, and we felt very betrayed by him at the time. And this time, I feel terribly betrayed by him once again.
Japanese officials are demanding Ghosn return and face justice.
Defendant Ghosn's assertions are unilateral and utterly unconvincing. If he has anything to say about the criminal case against him, he should make his arguments in a Japanese court and present concrete evidence.
But Ghosn, who allegedly escaped Japan inside this container, says he has no trust in Japan's justice system. And some experts say the legal battle with him could create more problems for Nissan.
It's going to be an uphill battle for Nissan because they have spent so much money on the investigation, and they're going to face litigation in the US. And they're going to need to have a very, very, very strong turnaround manager. So I hope the current management team is capable of this.
Before his arrest, Ghosn was hailed as the man who brought Nissan back from the brink and engineered its alliance with Mitsubishi and Renault to create the world's second largest car maker. Now, as Ghosn and his former colleagues accuse each other of jeopardizing the automaking union, some analysts are speculating that Nissan and Renault may soon part ways. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, Jim Holder joins us live now from London. He's the editorial director at the industry publishing group Haymarket Automotive. Welcome to the program, Jim. Now, before we get into his extraordinary press conference, what do you make of Carlos Ghosn? Do you believe he is guilty of financial misconduct as over the 20 years that he was boss of the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance?
Yeah, I think it would be a fairly big call for me to decide whether he was guilty or otherwise. I think what's important and what people still want to see despite him fleeing is that he's given a hearing and he's given a chance to put his case against the case of Nissan. So people can determine for themselves what he is and isn't guilty of. Certainly, some of the accusations that have been flying around against him are pretty damning if true. But what we need to know is the if true bit.
Yeah, that's right. Now, it was standing room only at Carlos Ghosn's press conference in Beirut on Wednesday. One of the allegations that he made during that briefing was that Nissan and the Japanese judiciary had plotted together to oust him as boss of Nissan because they were worried that perhaps Renault was gaining too much influence in that partnership. Do you believe, firstly, in that first part of that charge, that the judiciary and Nissan plotted together?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one to try and unravel. I think what we certainly know is that there was a resistance within Nissan to any suggestion that Renault would somehow take the company over. How that resistance manifested itself remains to be seen. But what appears to have happened from Ghosn's point of view, he felt that he'd progressed that idea of a full merger, a full Renault takeover far enough that it had reached a point where Nissan could no longer face into it. They no longer had an appetite for it, and they then triggered this as a way of getting out of that situation. Logically, if you look at it, there are certain characteristics and hallmarks that could make that potentially true. But whether the evidence is really there to stack it up, I think Carlos Ghosn needs to do some more talking. 2 hours was a long time yesterday, but there's a lot more that still needs to be thrown into the light.
That's right. Now, during his 21 years at the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance, Carlos Ghosn really had this interesting position, didn't he? He was the CEO of Renault while he was chairman of all three automakers, as well as the boss of the overarching group. Was this too much power, unchecked power for one man, do you think?
I think it's a very intriguing argument, and one that the car industry is going to have to look into, because there are other mergers happening now and likely more mergers or at least partnerships coming in the future. Thinking around the FCA group and its proposed merger at the moment with Peugeot Citroën. What we've seen is that typically these mergers, they do work well when there is a strong dictatorial figure at the top of them. They tend to be able to hold things together. They tend to be able to make things happen at a quicker pace. And they tend to have a sort of purpose that galvanizes the workforce. You would have to say that Carlos Ghosn, if you look at the totality of the 21 years, he did take, perhaps you could almost use the phrase basket case of Nissan. They were in desperate trouble, and he rose them up. He performed a great job at Renault in very short order after coming under his leadership. Mitsubishi found lots of synergies, saved lots of costs, and again, its fortunes changed very, very quickly. Now, whether a committee which is more accountable, has better governance, and so on and so forth, but whether they can achieve as much so quickly in what is a fast-paced industry that requires a lot of understanding of its nuances remains to be seen. The car industry model has typically worked well under that strong leadership model, but it has thrown up problems. It's not just, in this case, it's thrown up problems. If you look back to Volkswagen and Dieselgate, one of the first conclusions they drew was that there was too much power in the hands of too few people. So it can lead a company astray. And I think finding the balance between those two sides really is a struggle, and it all remains to be seen how car companies head into that in the future.
Yes, perhaps a cautionary tale for future mergers, as you pointed to there. Jim Holder in London, thank you so much for your analysis.